as promised, I'm back with another video. Thanks for all the comments. Rob from Boston, also Bo, Mr. Earhead6. Um, as promised, right? I said I would make some more videos, so I just, looking at this next stack of records I have, I'm just so excited about them and excited to share them with you. There's some great stuff. Again, most of this is like newer stuff, so for those of you that are sort of used to the old psych and the dusty moldy stuff, uh, sorry to say there's not really going to be too much of that in here, if any. Did want to give a shout out to Mr. Matt Sands. He had posted this on his Instagram a little bit ago. Gold Pan Records. So Matt could probably say it a little bit better than I can, but he's sort of doing this record store kind of studio collective thing. That's my understanding of it. So Matt, I'm sorry if I'm not saying the right thing, but a big Hammer horror fan. I love Hammer films. So this one is just, I couldn't pass this up. Most of it's just kind of spoken word kind of thing with incidental music, but yeah, I couldn't pass that up. So I'm actually missing some of the Hammer horror stuff on Comet. I don't know if you guys get that channel. I've basically, when I moved out of my parents' house, I never got cable, and still to this day, I've saved hundreds of thousands of dollars, no doubt. Got some splinters in my hand. I was doing some yard work earlier. But Comet TV, it's also streaming online. They're doing like a Hammer thing today, Sunday. So if you're watching this video any day other than the day it's posted, you missed it. So I got a couple CDs I wanted to show. This is some cool stuff that came out. So Jerry Garcia, The Electric on the Eel, just a huge little box of basically 3 full complete shows. Electric on the Eel, it was sort of like kind of a getaway kind of camping kind of thing that the Jerry Garcia band would play at. It's super loose. You can just kind of tell that they're just sort of hanging out, most definitely making some burgers and dogs. And Bo actually hooked me up with the Record Store Day. They released one of these shows for Record Store Day. But I still buy a lot of CDs. I'm still kind of in that. Sometimes it's a convenient format, and it's more cost effective, and it just it's you don't always need to get it on vinyl. So sometimes there's stuff that makes sense to get the digital and whatever. But there was if you bought it on their website, kind of pre-ordered it, there was an acoustic disc as well too. Sorry, the Ghost, aka the Wind. So that's really cool. I also picked this up. This just came out, I want to say about maybe a week ago or 2 weeks ago, maybe at this point. It's the Bob Dylan, The Rolling Thunder Review, the 1975 live recordings. Just a huge box of, this of course is like my favorite Dylan era, but just pretty much some, I don't know if they're complete shows, but there's a handful of, evening and afternoon shows, things like that. This was I got it for like $75. It's selling mostly, like if you buy it from direct, it's like $100. I was trying to get a deal on it for a little bit, and then after it came out, it was like super cheap on eBay. Saving about $30 on it. So haven't really gone through this whole thing quite yet. I'm familiar with some of the recordings which were released on that. I think bootleg 6, or was it bootleg 4? I can't remember. Bootleg 5. I think it was bootleg 5. So there's so many of them, I have a hard time remembering them. But this is awesome stuff. And again, some of this came out on vinyl, but for me, this is something just in the digital realm is just a lot better. So listening to the CD is, just kind of being able to sit down and listen to a whole bunch and not really have to like switch the records around or whatever is cool. So a lot of the music that I've been buying lately, I haven't been really doing a lot of record shopping, like actually at record stores. This past October, Bo Earhead6, I had the pleasure of having his company for about a full week. and we did it up and kind of did some. We did a concert, we did record shopping, kind of took him around the city, and it just happened to be like the busiest week of the year for me. But I had all this stuff going on for work, and we had to like run errands in between. But it was a good time, Bo, and I had some Leinenkugels because that's what you do. Um, and we went to kind of the main part of the trip, kind of the week that we planned it was we were going to go to Akron to go see the Byrds' 50th anniversary of Sweetheart of the Rodeo. And the concert, actually, I ended up seeing it twice. The first time was with Bo in Akron, and they had sort of announced some more dates, but Bo and I had kind of talked about it maybe a month or two in advance. He got tickets, and then they announced that they were actually going to come to Pittsburgh. So I saw them twice. It's an amazing show. It was really cool to see, the Sweetheart of the Rodeo, sort of the final word on it. See both Roger McGuinn and Chris Hillman. But the best part was it was backed up by Marty Stuart, who, Marty Stuart, I think I got some of his weird stuff here, right? So here's some stuff from the 80s. He used to play with, I think he was with Earl Scruggs. He played mandolin for Earl Scruggs back in the late 60s, early 70s. And he's had a pretty modest career, but he actually just released this album. I think this was maybe 2007. Yeah, so the show was in 2008. This one came, or I'm sorry, 2018. This came out in 2017. So I found this. This is a Barnes and Noble exclusive, but it's Marty Stuart Way Out West, autographed by members of the band. Chris Scruggs is on here, which is basically Earl Scruggs was his grandfather. But just an amazing record. It's cool because it sort of sounds like the kind of that Tom Petty vibe where it sounds vintage, but it's new and it's not. We're sort of in this time right now where these musicians can do things that they're not sounding too dated. Like the 80s were very terrible because a lot of the drum machines and electronic stuff and the synthesizers and that stuff took priority over two amplifiers and things like that. But this album is right back to where everything came from. It almost looks like it has a Sweetheart of the Rodeo sort of cover on the front of it. They're a Joshua Tree by the looks of it. But it's a very cool, great album. This was cool because it came with the CD too. You got the CD as well. So, but yeah, very cool. Produced by Mike Campbell, which of course, his work with Tom Petty. But there's some instrumentals on there, but it's just you don't really have to think too hard about this album. It's just an enjoyable listen. But yeah, so Bo and I, went and saw him, and he actually was going to play in Pittsburgh just by himself as with his band a few weeks ago. They had to cancel. So let's see. So another one. This is on Sub Pop. This guy, I've been sort of, I sometimes you just find yourself sort of on YouTube, and one of the ways I find a lot of my new music is I just sort of watch YouTube videos and see what I follow certain record labels and see what they're talking about. But Orville Peck, Pony. This is an amazing album. The Dead of Night video is I've probably watched it about 500 times. It's so good. But check out this vinyl. This is just this orange. It's a good looking vinyl right there. But this again out on Sub Pop. He's playing a lot of sold out shows. I'd say if you get a chance to see him, go see him. It's just really cool. He's his sort of musical thing is throwback to classic country, but he kind of takes I think everybody's kind of saying it's sort of like he's openly queer, and so he's sort of leading that kind of charge, I guess, in country music right now. So definitely check this out, Orville Peck Pony. There's a lot of really good ones on here. Dead of Night is amazing. Turn to Hate, there's a video for that. Queen of the Rodeo is really good. And Hope to Die, also amazing. The whole album is just a phenomenal album. So I think this came out, I want to say, in middle of March, but they started uh, kind of really hyping up the album at the beginning of January. So the next one I wanted to show. So I went to a show. I saw Sunvolt recently. So here's their new album. This just came out a little bit ago. It's called Union. We have a couple different covers of this. This is sort of they had a limited edition run where it was this, and then the other one kind of said Sunvolt real big, and you saw the sort of Sunvolt, and then you kind of saw this behind it. But um, Sunvolt's a band I've been listening to for a good deal of time. I saw, let's see, about 2005. This I got that too. I mean, this I've had for a while, but when this album came out, I kind of listened to it nonstop. It was really kind of reintroduced me to sort of that 2005, 2006 for me. I was listening to a lot of like really just discovering new artists that I never heard of, and um, Sunvolt was one of them. So cool to see them. Uh, the other thing that's I think is one of my favorite things about seeing live music is the opener, right? So you get these kind of big, these, and I use that term loosely, right? So there's one place where shows people play shows here in Pittsburgh that the venue's probably maybe like 1,000, like 1,000. It used to be an old church. They kind of they rehabbed it, took all the pews and everything out, but you sort of get those mid-rangey artists, the ones that are like they're kind of like too big to play a club, but they're too small to sort of play like a bigger theater. So, and I would kind of put Sunvolt in that um, range, but I like to see the opening acts, right? So, and that's sort of how I get to this guy. So he opened up for Sunvolt. Ian No, this album I think came out right at either at the end of May or at the beginning of June. But he's another guy that definitely pay attention to him. Sort of this modern country. He's from East Kentucky, and Sean, my good buddy from the internets, doesn't make videos anymore. He probably does, but he's probably just doing them for his. He plays a lot of music live now. It's kind of what the thing he's doing. But I guess Sean says he has a lot of mutual friends with Ian. Sean, of course, is from West Virginia. Um, but when he played, it was just him and acoustic guitar, and then there was another guy that was sort of playing like a B bender guitar, and I was just captivated because this album to me is sort of like the Trump America living in sort of the Rust Belt Appalachian sort of thing, right? And southwestern Pennsylvania is just sort of like we're sort of on the tip of that, a lot of the steel stuff, and believe me, in the 40s during the war, that the steel mills just cranked out stuff 24/7, 365. And by the time the 70s rolled around, and plastics were introduced, and all that stuff was made in China, a lot of those jobs left. And Pittsburgh's still recovering from that. They're still they're still a little behind everybody. But this album sort of speaks to me in that sense that there's a lot of areas that are sort of pretty poverty stricken, and I love it. It's a great album. Ian No, Between the Country. If you see him, if he's coming to your town, definitely go see him. He is amazing. So, I mean, every single song on here is so good. The Irene is amazing. Letter to Madeline, or Madeline, I guess I could say it. So good. It's like just sitting and reading the lyrics as he's doing it. It's like you're very familiar with the songs, even though that you've never heard the album before. So, really cool. Do a couple more here, and then we'll tie it up for today. Here's one this is from a guy that used to do videos in the vinyl community, as it was maybe 8 years ago, I think, at this point. But Brandon Graham, who is who's in a band called Dream Phases, which is pretty much like I really don't know as far as his brother plays drums, and I had the pleasure of meeting both of them. They came and played a show a little while ago. But this is I think they're like they've done a CD. He didn't. The band was called something different, but Dream Phases is sort of what he's doing now. This is called Clear Skies, Maybe Tomorrow, And this was actually recorded, like it's on really cool looking vinyl. So definitely check it out. I mean, it's there's a lot of different. This reminds me of a sort of like an electro record where it's sort of there's an eclectic. It's like each song is almost like a different genre, which is, I know that sometimes that can be a little difficult for people. They want to listen to sort of the same thing when they listen to it, but the album is a little on the challenging side as far as that is, because you want kind of like some songs to be like, like dreamy folk psych stuff. But then there's a song on there that's like pretty hard. That's I would kind of classify as stoner rock. But so check that out. Like that's out on Nomad Eel Records. I don't know if this is still in print or not on vinyl. I think it was a limited run because it looks, the way that those were pressed. A couple more for you here. William Bealey, also known as William C. Bealey. This is Highways and Heartaches. This is a new album. I haven't busted this open yet, but it's on the Tompkins Square label. Like I said, I've been a big fan of a lot of the stuff they've been putting out. But William C. Bealey he sort of had the Moby Dick of vinyl for me. He had the white whale that you never see. He had an album that was called Gallivanting. That in the days of sort of blogs and things like that, I came across, and copies are like $400 for them. But Tompkins Square re-released the Gallivanting album like last year, maybe 2 years ago at this point. But this is his first new album. This is like his third album, so he did one in the 70s as well too, like early 70s. But really excited for this one. I think there were some guys from Los Lobos on here. I'm not too sure, but again, I'll maybe talk a little bit more about this as I dig into it. Another one that I got that was really cool. This is called Sing It High, Sing It Low, Tumbleweed Records. This was released on Light in the Attic, and it's I kind of have a fascination with record labels sometimes, but this is in the early 70s. A lot of these bands that were, sort of these LA bands, they kind of started doing the Eagles thing, right? The Eagles trip, where they were playing sort of this country rock. But this is sort of a collection of this, kind of that kind of vibe. So they released a handful of albums, and this is sort of just like a taster. I've seen some of them, but it's really good quality. I mean, it's a really heavy jacket. But again, very descriptive stuff to kind of lose yourself into. But there's a couple of the albums that were released. Which I've seen this before. I know I've seen that record before. So, but just a very cool thing. Light in the Attic had a sale. I think it was like a spring cleaning sale, maybe about a month ago. And they were releasing like some LPs were like $7. I think this was maybe like 8 or 9. Some were like super cheap. So I had to pick that up. And I also picked up this. I haven't opened it up yet, but the His Golden Messenger devotion songs about rivers, spirits, and children. This is kind of a collection of his earlier music is sort of all over the different labels and things like that. So kind of a collection of everything. I have a couple of these albums already, but it's just cool to kind of get the box set of it. And I saw him recently in concert, so it was much cheaper to buy it this way than to get it shipped. So that's all I have for now. So enjoy the rest of your Sunday. Go watch some Comet Hammer Horror. That's what I'm going to do. And we'll see you next time. So take care.